Hi, today I'm going to do a quick tutorial showing how to take some Dollar Tree socks and make a doll onesie or a doll. If you can see that good. Now these are some low cut socks, so I won't be able to make socks out of them. I don't think I'll have enough. But on this one, these were some regular children's socks that I cut, and I was able to make both the onesie and the little socks for this little doll. So to get started, you need a pair of socks, of course. This is how the sock look when I cut it. So the first thing you do is you cut the toe off the sock. And then you take and right along that center where the fold line is along the back, along the heel of the sock, you cut all the way down. So when you open that sock up, it looks like that. So now I have two of these. On some socks, like this sock here, the design, well, on this sock, the design was all the way around. So I was able to, you can see it comes together on the side and everything. But on this sock, it's just one design. So since where this heel is, I'm going to make that be my little cap sleeve on this one. So the first thing I'm going to do is fold both of these pieces down like this here, just like that. So you notice I have two. Now I'm going to take my needle and thread. You don't need a lot of supplies for this. I need scissors, a needle, thread, and maybe I might use my glue. I don't know for sure. Okay, so I take this and I flap it open just like this. And this is my fold line. You can see by this one here. So I'm going to make a running stitch, but I want it to be very tight. So the first thing I'm going to do is back tack a little bit. Make sure that's a good knot there. And then I'm going to sew across in 2 inches. And as a guide for your sock, see where that heel ends? I don't know if you can see. Right there is where that seam, where the heel was. So I'm going to sew in right along that. I'm taking teeny tiny stitches because this is a knit. And normally I'd be sewing on the sewing machine. But I know not everybody have a sewing machine, so I wanted to do this by hand. So you could see how simple this is. To the end of that little spot. So I'm going to knot that twice. And by knotting it, I just go through. This is the third time actually. When you get that little loop, you go through this loop here and pull tight. Now I'm going to cut. Okay, and now we're going to do the exact same thing on the other side. We're going to find where that heel mark is. You can barely see it on camera, I'm not sure. And I'm going to start right there this time. I'm going to do a couple of knots in it to be sure that it's tight. I don't have to worry about it coming loose. And I'm going to sew right to the edge of that. And I'm doing this with white thread for you to see the stitches. Hopefully you can see the stitches. Okay, so now I'm to the end. So I'm going to knot that again. 1 knot, 2 knots. Okay, stick my needle in my thread so I know where it's at. So now this looks like this. So this is my neck opening here. The next thing I'm going to do, see, I need to go back and restitch that. Can you see how loose my stitching is? This side is good, the other side's not too good. Okay, so my next thing I'm going to do, where I have these right here where this was fold back, I'm going to take my needle and thread and this will give me a nice clean stitch. I'm going to let that fabric roll in from the sock. You can see how that automatically rolls in. And I am going to do like a slip stitch, which will be invisible on the right side of the sweater. Try to do this for you to see. See, I'm going right into the fold of that. Hopefully you can see what I'm doing. And you know, this would be a spot if you didn't do a lot of sewing, if you wanted to glue this step, it would be fine. I do not recommend gluing the shoulder seams and like the neck seams and the hems and stuff, because this is a knit fabric that will stretch. And most fabric glues do not stretch. So now I'm going to do the same thing on this side. I'm going to let this roll it in where the natural roll would be. See, so that's all rolled in. I got to cut that little piece of thread that's hanging out. Okay. And you notice you're not seeing any of my stitches on this here. I'm just right in that fold line. Okay. So now I'm down to the end. I'm going to knot this. One knot, two knots. So you can see that looks nice on the inside and on the outside. Then I would cut my threads. And you want to do the exact same thing on this other side. So I find my little edge where this inside ends. Let it roll in. If you stretch it slightly, that will make a natural roll. It will just roll inside. Okay. I'm going to start right there. And I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm just kind of doing what you call a whip stitch. And when you pull that stitch tight, that way it disappears. But you know, it doesn't matter really if the stitching show. Okay, so then when we get right here up here where this top ends, you want to make sure this side here, you have to make sure that roll in as well. And it's a very quick project. I mean, maybe 15-20 minutes. Okay, so now I'm down to the edge of this other one here. So I'm going to knot my thread. And this time, instead of cutting my threads, I may have gotten off camera, I don't know. Instead of cutting my threads this time, what I'm going to do is match up my side seams here. And I'm going to bring them together. And I'm going to sew these. This will become my side seam. Now, if you were making a sweater like this for a Barbie, and I'm going to knot this a few times where this come together and sew straight down in and out with teeny tiny stitches. My stitches got kind of big on one of my shoulders. So, and if you want to, you can go back and do what's a lock stitch. That's where you go back to the stitch you came out and go ahead a few stitches. Go back one stitch and go ahead. That gives you a really tight and secure stitch. Okay. So, let's do this. Keep going all the way down. And each time now, I'm going back one stitch. And when I get to the very bottom, of course, I'm going to tie my stitches off by going in my loop and pull tight. In my loop, in the fabric I mean, and the loop and pull tight. Then I will cut my threads. Okay. So now I'm going to knot my thread again. And if you have any questions, you can always email me or put it down in the comments, and I'll be glad to try to answer the question. Now on this side here, we're going to match up the bottoms, and it should match up the armholes automatically. And I'm going to do tie my stitching off with a knot and sew straight down again. The only thing I'm not going to do on camera, because I forgot to get them out, I do put a snap between the legs at the crotch. I don't know if you can see that. I'm still just doing a running stitch. And I take about 5 stitches maybe each time. And but see how I'm going back one? See, my thread came out there. I'm going back 1 stitch, and that locks my stitches in place. I'm to the bottom, and I'm going to knot it good. Okay, so it doesn't look like much now, but what I'm going to do now, just to kind of show you, I'm going to turn it to the right side. And, okay. Now we're going to, only thing left to do now is to put a hem in this. This may be a little too short for this doll. I'm not sure. Oh, no, it'll fit him. It'll fit because this does stretch. Okay. And the other reason I folded so much back on this one at the neck, because this design was down so low, I didn't want it to be all the way down between the legs. So that was the other reason I folded back about 2 inches, or 1.5 inches probably. Okay, so I'm going to knot my thread again. And you see this little toe part right here that I cut off earlier? I'm actually going to, when I'm putting my hem in, I am actually going to be stitching this back on, because this is going to become the part that goes between the crotch, and the snap would actually go right here on the toe. So to do my hem, the first thing, of course, I do is take a few stitches. Excuse me, not a few stitches, is to make a knot. And on this, what you want to do is be folding in about about 1/4 of an inch. I don't know if you really can see that on the screen. And then I'm going to be doing the same thing, no fancy stitches, just a running stitch, but I'm taking a very teeny tiny running stitch so it does not show on the right side of the fabric. And if you had the exact same color thread, it really wouldn't matter if you went all the way through. But see, when I come through this side here, you don't even see the needle. Can you see just how little tiny bit I push the needle out and go back in? On this side, I take a little longer stitch, about 1/8 of an inch. Okay, and I tighten that. And again, on this one, I go back a stitch because I want this to be very secure. So I go back, 1 stitch, and I go, keep going, keep going. I'm probably going to run out of thread. Probably going to have to rethread my needle. Okay. And believe it or not, this step here is a little easier to do by hand than machine. If you were to do this on the machine, you'd want to put some type of stabilizer under the stitching, because otherwise, if my light just went out, um, because otherwise this fabric, this sock would be stretching a whole lot. So now I'm round to the other side seam. So what I'm going to do, since I see I'm going to run out of thread, I'm going to go on and knot my thread here and rethread again. So I'm going to do about a, even though my loop is little, my thread is short. Notice I knotted that a few times. Do anybody else have problems with their ring light sometimes just randomly going out? And it's not that old, so I don't know. Maybe I bought one that was too cheap. Okay, so I'm knotting my thread again. And then to decide where this little toe part go, what you can do is go in and fold this in half, matching your side seams. This here is the center back. So you would fold this sock, the toe of the sock, matching the center back seams. And then what I'm going to do is go on and stitch this on. Now, okay, so I'm just going to do a running stitch. This one do not have to be that tight or anything because you're actually going to be stitching back over this again. Okay, so I'm doing this really fast and big stitches. Well, not real big. So actually no parts of, well, one toe of the sock is the only waist on this. Okay, so I'm to the other side now, but instead of cutting my thread, this is going to naturally fold up. Okay, so I'm just going to go on and meet back up with the side seam. I mean, you could go on and knot again, but what I'm going to do, I'm doing kind of a larger stitch here because I'm actually, okay, so now I have that stitched down, right? So this same part here, since I didn't cut my thread, I am going to knot it. And I'm going to go back over that same little part again. That's just because I was being lazy and didn't want to knot my thread and re-knot it and all of that. So now I'm stitching right back over the toe of the sock again, where we stitched this part on. Remember, that was the toe. Now that becomes the crotch of the onesie. If you were making a t-shirt, you would just hem this up. You would not have to add this part here. But since these are little babies, I wanted it to be like a little onesie or a bodysuit. Okay, so now, and these dolls will be for sale on Tuesday night at 9 o'clock on the channel. It'll be an all dolls. Well, there'll be a couple other things, but mainly predominantly dolls. And we're hoping to have a special guest, and I will announce who that guest is soon. Well, it ain't soon. It's got to be like tomorrow or whatever. So I'm back around to the side seam, so I'm just knotting this off. And now it's finished except for the snap. So now here's the doll. I will pull this over her head. You don't have to worry because this fabric is real stretchy. Now remember, we had little armholes, so her little arms will go in. Put your little arm in. And she does have a real pamper on. These are actually preemie Pampers. Okay, so then that comes down like that. And see, this here will come up and it'll be a snap there and a snap there. And I'm just going to use a pin, my needle, to actually hold this together. But I would actually be putting a snap there. So you can see how cute that looks on. Now, what I'm going to do with this one here, this actually, all of these fabric materials came from the Dollar Tree. They have this decorative tool. This is what the label looks like. And 3 yards come on there. So I cut off 1.5 yards and it's 6 inches wide. I folded in half because I created a little tutu. I just ran a running stitch all the way along there. I am going to stitch some ribbon around there just for decoration and to help hold it a little more secure. I'm pulling this apart a little, and then that will become her little tutu. Okay, let me put a little pin in that to hold that so you can get a better idea of what this is going to look like. I know I'm off screen with that right now. Okay, so I'm just putting a pin back here to hold it. And now there she is. And then what else I'll probably do with her is she'll have a pretty bow on her head, and I probably will give her some hair or something. It's not probably, I'm definitely going to give her some hair. And then I'm not sure what kind of shoes I'll put on her, but this is what it will look like. And here's the other little one. Like I said, this one I actually put a little sleeve on because, like I said, this was a regular sock. This was like a knee high. So I had lots of fabric to work with. This was a low cut sock, so I didn't have that extra fabric to work with. But I think she looks nice. Let me know what you think. And there'll be a little bow, and probably I'll add to the center of there a little flower or something. So hopefully you like this tutorial, and thanks for joining us. Bye-bye. Joining me, rather, is not a us. Well, the baby. And like I said, the live sale will be Tuesday, September the 21st at 9 o'clock p.m. on my channel. So I look forward to seeing everybody then. And bye-bye.